Welcome to the Coventry and Warwickshire Green Business Programme podcast. Subscribe now for more episodes. Welcome to the 12th edition of the Green Business Programme podcast. I'm Jonathan Howell, an energy advisor at Coventry City Council, and the subject of today's discussion is the circular economy. As with all of our engagement, be it our webinars, our in-person events and podcasts, we try and bring tangible advice on sustainability issues to our business community. Now, when I'm speaking to businesses out and about in the field, I appreciate that there's a lot of buzzwords out there. For example, there's net zero, which we discussed on last month's podcast, electric vehicles, green hydrogen, retrofits, and so on and so on. So there's so many new words out there which people perhaps don't quite understand or need a further explanation of. So this session aims to break down and explain the term circular economy effectively in three main ways. First of all, what it is. Secondly, what the benefits are. And then thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, we're looking to stimulate an interest in different ways of people working, basically. Now, we know there's not a single silver bullet out there to solve the climate change crisis, but hopefully by sharing ideas and influencing behaviour, we can hopefully all work together to make a difference. So to help with today's discussion, I'm pleased to bring you two experts. I have Waco Yokoyama from Gemserv, and then lastly, our very own Bret Willers from Coventry City Council. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome Waco to the session. Waco, firstly, thanks for your time today. Could you give us a quick introduction to yourself and your role at Gemserv?
Yes, so thank you, Jonathan, for having me today. I'm a consultant in the low carbon business unit at Gemserv. We tackle social and environmental challenges, work on improving efficiency, addressing problems using digital solutions, and ensuring data protection. My background is in sustainable development with a master's in environmental change and management from the University of Oxford, and I now specialize in ESG and circular economy.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining, and you're the perfect person to answer these questions today. So thank you. Right. So getting into the details straight away, then I'd like to just to start off with an opening question, basically. For the benefit of our listeners, could you give us a quick explanation of what circular economy means?
Sure. So currently, our model of production, consumption, and management is a one-way street. So when a designer, manufacturer create a product, it's created with the expectation that the material's only purpose is to serve this one product or service. But the truth is, the product has the potential of becoming a material deposit for the next product. So adopting circularity means designing, creating, and using so that this product is optimized as much as possible, that it's easily repairable, and that once it becomes a material deposit, it's ready to be reused. And it also means designing a system where circularity is enabled and has economic value to businesses.
Okay, understood. I mean, I did a quick Google search, which is very, very basic, and the three key words that jumped out were recycled, reused, repurposed. So I think that's a more simplistic way of looking at it, but that sort of covers the main areas of the principle, doesn't it, in the main?
Yeah, it has to be, it can't just be a product that's circular, it also has to be the system. Yeah.
Okay, understood. Fantastic. Okay, so obviously, as you know, we at the Green Business Programme, we deal with businesses in the Coventry and Warwickshire area. For argument's sake, just say I'm a business looking to integrate circularity into their operation. What would the main benefits be in the main to that?
Well, I suppose adopting circularity is basically future proofing business. So increasingly, raw materials, for example, have become more expensive to source.
Yeah.
And this is for a number of reasons. And so, for example, as we've started to incorporate social and carbon cost, we now realize the true cost of products and services. So it would make a lot more economic sense and also would enable the business or service to be resilient moving forward.
Okay, so basically the main driver is cost savings then. I mean, my role, as you probably know, is in energy. So I'm always looking at ways of reducing businesses' cost savings for energy. So it's obviously the main driver is that inherent cost saving benefit on the bottom line, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a unique solution because it's basically looking at how to make sure that it makes sense for the business at the same time that it is socially and environmentally sound. So it's just trying to make it as palatable for businesses and to make it make sense. That's quite a key driver for circular economy.
Okay, understood. So would the circular economy principles be the same whichever sector a business was in? I mean, just to give you a bit of a set the scene on that. In Coventry, we've got a large manufacturing sector, but obviously we also cover Warwickshire, where it's more sort of there's more hotels and more leisure activities. Would the principles apply the same to any sector, or are they do they vary across which sort of sector the business works in the main?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because it does overlap quite a lot. So, at face value, manufacturing sectors, for example, are able to make products circular and therefore they would have more focus around the R&D, whereas services would usually focus on creating a circular ecosystem. But that doesn't mean that a a hotel wouldn't be able to partner with a manufacturer to support them along that journey and vice versa. And it doesn't mean that manufacturers can wouldn't think about the system and would
Yeah,
only think
yeah.
about the product. So it is really important that there is an overlap between the two, although for sure there are different roles depending on what part of the
Yes.
ecosystem you are in.
I suppose, of course, by the very nature of the business, it would vary, wouldn't it? So I'm sort of answering my own question there. So if you were a hotel, you'd have different raw materials coming in than if you were a steel works, for example. Understood. I've answered my own question as I've said. So thank you. So in your opinion, what's the main barriers to people implementing circular economy? Is it just lack of knowledge of what it is, or are the cost barriers, or is it a knowledge barrier? What do you think the main barriers are to sort of bringing that into a business operation?
I've noticed three key barriers. So the first is that because circularity is mostly about future proofing, it's something that will prove more value in the long term. And so it can often seem high cost in the moment. The returns can be lower than other solutions. On the positive side, it does mean that because the circular solutions are very holistic, it means that there are less spillover effects, for example.
Yes, yeah, understood.
Um,
And I suppose as well, one of the main barriers could be lack of knowledge about it, which of course is what this podcast is designed to help with, is to sort of stimulate that interest, basically.
Exactly, exactly. So that ties in really well with my second point about, that there's a lot of focus around creating circular products rather than circular systems. But
Yes,
the problem
understood.
is
Yeah,
that circular system is crucial to realizing the potential of the product. There is no point in creating a product that can be recycled if there isn't a place where they can bring the
yeah.
product for it to be recycled. Yeah, and
The two have to go hand in hand effectively to make it be a success, I imagine.
exactly. And the last point is that sometimes ESG strategies focus on decarbonization solutions, but these can still be stuck in a linear model.
Yes.
So, for example, green technology, it does help with decarbonization. But if companies don't think about where these technologies are actually going to go to after their life cycle, then it becomes a problem for the future. So it's really important that carbonization solutions are also circular.
Yes, understood. Understood. So, in your line of work, then, do you have any examples, any live examples of companies you've advised, and has that led to, for example, lower costs, increased sales, or reduced reliance on, I don't know, perhaps a specific raw material? Do you have any live examples that we could share with our audience?
Yeah, so interestingly, circular economy has become an area where companies find their competitive edge. So a lot of companies who are complying very easily with regulation, they look for how to compete within the industry or even how to lead. And the earlier they start, the earlier they realize the value. So,
Yeah.
for example,
Yes.
some companies they've already been working on R&D to replace raw materials
Yes.
or to source it sustainably. So they might have partnered with material recovery factories. And this means that because they've been doing this for such a long time, the cost of the raw materials, as the cost of the raw materials increase over time, they are already very prepared for
Yes.
alternative
Yeah.
solutions. And so this is, for example, cobalt in EVs, or neodymium in sort of heat pumps.
Mhm.
So as consumers and investors begin to sort of scrutinize more about the sourcing of the materials and waste management, companies have found that they found more reason to actually put more effort into circularity as well.
Yeah. Understood. I mean, as an example to you and to our listeners, who the chap I'm going to mention might be listening. I won't mention your company name, but I helped a business about 6 months ago where they wanted some investment to buy a centrifuge to help reduce their oil usage in their manufacturing process. So effectively, we helped them with a grant for a large centrifuge that actually spun the parts rather than washing the parts. That
Mm.
allowed the oil to be reused at the start of the manufacturing process, and it also drove down his energy usage considerably as well. So it's very much a win-win for him. So that's my example to anyone listening out there. There's various ways of looking at this, big and small, and it will increase your or decrease your investment in raw materials, and hopefully in this case reduce your energy usage as well. So there's lots of spin-offs basically. So
Yeah,
so
that's a
thanks for your examples.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because it is often easily forgotten that circular economy related initiatives, they also tackle to reducing scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3
Yes,
emissions.
yes,
So
yes.
it is often a win-win. Yeah.
Yeah, win-win basically. So thank you. Good answer. Okay, so I mentioned at the start of or start of the podcast rather, about the silver bullet, as I phrased it. So with that in mind, in a much wider context, could circular economy be a really tangible solution to fighting climate change impacts at national and global scales?
Yes, absolutely. So designing decarbonization solutions in a circular system can help to mitigate future spillover effects. And these are things that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to be monitored. And that's because, we're focusing so much on decarbonization, and that makes a lot of sense. We really need to. But by focusing on it, it is very easy to then forget about, the problems that are coming up next. So, for
Yes. Yeah.
example, the more we produce green technology, which we need to make sure that we're not actually mining in areas that we shouldn't, that the local
Yeah.
communities there are respected, that there's no land grab. So there are things like that can be mitigated by making sure that the system is circular. So, for instance, another example would be in the designing of renewable technologies, adopting circularity principles can mean prioritizing recovery of materials over
Yes.
mining raw materials. So there are a number of these initiatives that can actually, decarbonization initiatives that can be made more circular.
Yeah, understood. I did see in the news in the week. Obviously, we're all pushing solar panels left, right, and centre. But of course, somebody raised the point. Well, hang on a minute. In 25 years' time, we might have a glut of solar panels there, which we need to do something with. It's going to be a massive problem. So we need to start building in the circularity now to allow us to get at those raw materials in the solar panel when it comes to end of life to reuse it basically. So we need to be thinking about it immediately, don't we? Basically.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like including the end of life management much earlier in the
Yeah.
designing process.
Yes.
So
Yes.
actually incorporating it when you design it. So,
Yeah.
architectures, for example, planning what the building is going to, what's going to happen to the
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
once people are no longer going to be living in it, or once it is
Yeah.
going to collapse. So it's quite a long-term thought process, but it's just something
Yeah.
that we need to start
And
incorporating.
and I suppose it goes against. Would I say? Yeah, it goes against human nature a little bit, doesn't it? We're all used to throwaway society, short-termism. It goes against that. We need to look more longer term, basically, and start thinking of the future more to get it right. Okay, excellent. I'm going to jump onto something now, which I think you've got experience in. Policies. Are there any, with this in mind, what we spoke about so far, are there any policies, any sort of government strategies at all in place to sort of promote this, or is it the private sector doing it on their own, or a bit of both? What's your thoughts on that?
I suppose it depends on what country you're talking about. So,
Okay. Yeah.
France, for example, it's been the first mover in terms of circular economy regulations. So, in 2020, their anti-waste and circular economy law established a few targets. So that includes like phasing out single-use plastic packaging by 2040, promoting better resource management systems from design to recovery. And they also have introduced a number of measures. So that includes banning the destruction of unsold non-food products and also introducing mandatory repairability indexes. And these this sort of carrot and sticks are crucial, especially when the linear model is the default for a lot of businesses.
When did France start to bring those kind of things in again? I know can you just clarify that for me again?
Yeah,
Was it a long time ago? Or was it a recent innovation for them?
no, it was much more recent. It was in 2020 that this law was actually established, but there's been a lot of development since then. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then the EU, like the CSRD, so the recent Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, they have started incorporating circular economy, which before was just a voluntary measure for businesses that just wanted to do something extra. So it is really, we do see it coming up a lot more in policy.
Yeah. So the frameworks are there. They clearly work. We just need to implement it more over here, basically, to sort of stimulate that growth. By the sounds of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Okay. Please say we're now onto our final question of the day for you. And so, just to sort of set the scene again, as you know, we deal with SMEs in Coventry and Warwickshire. If I was an SME, probably 50 employees working in manufacturing in Coventry, for argument's sake, where would I start? What would be the best sort of port of call, effectively? I mean, I follow the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I read a lot of their newsletters, that kind of thing. Where would I start? Is the material available? Do I need to employ a specialist? Do I need to go to a consultant? What would be the best thing, in your opinion, to kick off, as it were?
So we do support a lot of clients that are really in those shoes. And what we do is we support through policy and industry insight. This can be done in-house, but if it is done in-house, it can often involve a number of trial and error. So
Yeah,
businesses
understood.
do like to employ consultants we're already familiar with designing circular strategies. We're already familiar with sort of anticipating risks and threats. So
Yes,
it does
understood.
allow us to kind of provide that insight that's already built.
So would your sort of first, as a consultant, would your first protocol be spend time on, say it's a factory, say it's a manufacturing business? Would you spend time on site, delving into everything that's going in and out of the business? Is that your sort of your first step,
Yeah,
effectively?
yeah, data and understanding your own business. So understanding how ready you are, so how prepared and how sustainable you are already.
Okay, good answer. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to wrap up for today. So, look, thank you ever so much for your time today and sharing your expertise. It's been really appreciated. For anyone listening, if this has stimulated any ideas to help your business, or maybe you're a resident and you've got some ideas on how to start your circular economy journey, do get in touch with us via the details on the podcast description. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, for the last section of our Green Business Programme podcast, I would like to welcome Bret Willers to speak. Some of you may know Bret. He is the Head of Climate Change and Sustainability here at Coventry City Council. Welcome, Bret. For our audience, can you give yourself a quick introduction and explain a little bit about your role, please?
Hi, yes, I'm Bret Willers. I'm responsible for sustainability and climate change in the City Council. Worked in private sector, public sector, and national charities, dealing with environment, regeneration, sustainability. Over 20 odd years. I've also been involved in the European developing the sustainable strategies for Europe for the EU. I did some work there, and also worked on the Oldberg Charter and a number of other things. So yeah, quite a lot of experience in this area.
Sounds like you've obviously got a very good CV. So thanks for joining. Just to set the sort of context for our chat now. first part of the podcast, we've outlined the basics for our listeners of the circular economy to give our audience a better understanding of what it is and how it works. What I'd like to do now is try and link this into the Coventry context, into your role at Coventry Council, and give some examples to our listeners as to what our role at the council is within the circular economy and how we're encouraging sustainability and circularity. So we've obviously talked in the past about our new climate change strategy that's currently under development. Can you give our audience a bit of a background to that strategy and how it's been developed and sort of what the main objectives are, just to set the scene?
So there's five pathways that the strategy covers really, and these are the International Council for Local Environment Initiatives pathways. So first one is low emissions. The second one is circular economy. So it's really important. It's one of the key themes. Biodiversity, encouraging nature. Then there's resilience and adaptation. Finally, there's equitable, which is also has elements in there which are really important relating to circular economy. And that's about dealing with disadvantaged communities that are adversely affected by environmental issues, people suffering from food poverty, and all those kind of issues, about addressing those issues.
Okay, so obviously it's a key part of our strategy moving forward, then, which is great to hear. So with regards to the circular economy piece then of our strategy, how do you envisage that sort of benefiting businesses and the environment within the city?
So first of all, there's a number of things. So there's the selfish interest from the council's point of view in terms of having waste to dispose, which actually has a cost. So obviously to reduce the amount of waste going into the waste stream is always beneficial to the council and to the public from the environmental impact it has, but also the cost of disposing of it and everything else. So that's one element. But the other element that's more important is actually trying to stimulate the economy. The future of our economy is going to be hinging around this, how good we are at dealing with the circular economy. As material resources are diminishing around the world and prices are going up for raw materials, obviously it's going to make sense to find ways of either using less materials in the construction of goods and services in the first place, but also in terms of trying to recover them from products as we use them, trying to extend the lifetime of products. It's actually looking about a new economic model. It's a new way of doing business. And if anyone remembers in the old days when colour televisions used to cost loads of money and people used to rent televisions, there's a rediffusion and they used to be repaired, and it was in the company's interest to keep that television alive as long as possible. So the whole kind of ethos, the whole business was predicated around extending the life of the product and the goods and the services that were provided. So in a way, we're going to go back to that kind of model, I think, in terms of a lot of things that we do with businesses, things where people like car sharing and things like that, things which actually is shared, extend the life and use of things, as particularly as they're going to get more expensive as materials, which in terms of their cost of manufacture is only going to increase as materials reduce. That's also about energy. So it's looking at full life cycle analysis. So literally from cradle to grave, as it's used to be used in the past, that term, it's not used so much now. We use the word circular economy, but it's very much a similar thing. So it's thinking about what products, how we make them. And it's also about one company's waste could be another company's raw material. So the industrial symbiosis agenda. It's in our interest to get us encourage and support innovation across all the different sectors within the Coventry Warwickshire region, and the universities have a key role to play in that, Warwickshire Manufacturing Group and others, and we actually have within the city, we actually have a circular economy pathway group that's chaired by Russ Hall at the Warwickshire Manufacturing Group, and at the moment they're working on a project which is looking at laptops. Laptops used by ourselves, by the hospitals trusts and by the universities. Average lifetime, for example, at Warwick University is 3 years. High spec laptop, nothing wrong with it at the end of 3 years. Normally it'll get crushed, disposed of and then recycled, when in fact it's got many years left in it, which it could be used by students that we have on work placements, people who don't have access to IT, could continue the lifetime and use of that product, providing we can clear the disks and do the right service and repairs and maintenance services, all those sorts of things we need to focus on. So it's a nice example of a kind of project that they're working on that actually will have real benefits in terms of reducing the amount of carbon that's used, because carbon consumption in the manufacture of a laptop is massive. So we can help to reduce all those things as well.
A good answer, and it's good to hear that there's lots going on behind the scenes already anyway, as well as part of the strategy in terms of this this very important activity, which is great. Just to quickly link our podcast, as everyone knows, it's a business podcast, but I don't want to just focus on the business side of things. So does the strategy have allowance within there as well for helping residents, helping people become in their homes more efficient and more circular driven, as it were?
Yes, very important this, and people might well know from the past. They used to be quite common in, particularly in disadvantaged areas of the city. We'd have things like toy libraries and tool stores. So if you think of someone on a low income that needs to use a drill, to buy a drill is really expensive, and they're only going to use it a few times, and then it just sits there in the garage not getting used. So there are initiatives where you've got the opportunities to develop social enterprises, things like the old tool hire companies. You know, those have diminished. It's been quite interesting to see the number of those companies that have reduced. I think they need to get back up again, and extend, particularly for lower income areas. So you have Emmaus, which is a furniture recycling. We said people chucking away decent furniture, things. I mean, I had a really nice, very large king size bed. Nothing wrong with it, So it's brand, it's pretty good condition. No, I gave that to Emmaus, which now that's gone to a family who need it, and they've actually got a quality piece of furniture. And I think there's often people, you see those television programs, where people dumping stuff in the skip when actually you don't have to remodel it. You can actually just use that. Many of those items, there's nothing wrong with them. So people don't think about that. And I think they need to think about that a lot more. But that presents an opportunity for skilling people up, learning new skills, doing recycling, repair, and then actually then selling them on in a different market. So one project I worked with years ago in Cardiff is still running, called Track 2000. It won loads of awards. The guys that run it are now got MBEs, but it's about 25 years providing a service where people get low cost furniture. And we also repaired white goods, and it trained about 97 people each year. So people learning new skills. So really positive things can come out from the circular economy when we look at it.
Excellent. I mean, I've also heard myself that certain furniture companies, who I won't name, are now allowing people to rent furniture rather than buy it. And I think also there's some clothing companies that are doing the same for your more high-end fashions. So obviously it's becoming more and more prominent, isn't it? If we can sort of gather that pace and advertise it and promote it, then that's obviously a good thing for our city moving forward. And I particularly like your TV analogy earlier on in your answer. That's something that a lot of people can probably relate to, because I can remember sort of renting a TV when I was a student, renting a washing machine, those kind of things. So we know how to do it. It just needs to sort of regain that, or lessen that throwaway mentality, don't we? Basically, moving forward. Just moving on to my next question. Then I want to just flip back to the climate change strategy that I know you've been very, very highly involved in. Part of that was obviously a consultation where you're looking for feedback from city residents and city businesses. Just out of interest, did you get any people within that consultation suggesting things to you about the circular economy? Did you get many sort of people sort of suggesting more ideas to you, or did you not get much back at all?
No, got quite a lot of emphasis, actually. A lot of emphasis about not buying things that are short-lived. Like reference to, for example, the clothing market, and the clothing sector is a massive consumer of energy, water, and resources, and everyone knows that. And it's one of the biggest impact sectors. In fact, clothing is often it's got free. Lots of reference to things like buying only clothes that you really need, going for quality, not necessarily just the stuff that some companies do, which are just worn once and then thrown away. So move away from that. So there's a lot of reference from people to things like that. There's also reference to things, ability to be able to get things repaired and fixed, to extend the life of products, not to necessarily buy something new as fashionable necessarily, to not be hooked into that. So there's a lot of interesting comments around that, around reuse, repair, coming out from the community. So yeah, there's clearly and reducing the amount of waste, the amount we consume,
That
waste
must be
particularly.
pleasing for yourself in your position to see that there's that level of community engagement in this moving forward, mustn't it? Rather than
Yeah,
having a passive audience, you've got an audience that's obviously engaged with you and wants to improve things, I
a lot of
imagine.
people conscious of waste and the amount of waste. I think that concerns them. So anything that does that, I think I would also like to think if we're looking at companies to really consider who handles their waste and how it's handled.
Yeah.
So like in Coventry, we got Tom White Waste, who do a
Yes.
lot of, and for example, they're finding ways with trade waste, in particular around the construction sector, looking at how materials can be reused to
Yeah.
extend the life of products. I remember Russ Hall telling me from the WMG about, these steel lintels that are used in building. A lot of them actually, when taken out of buildings, are in perfectly good nick to be used, but they
Yeah.
obviously can't be used because their safety has to be assessed, and then
Yeah.
it's being able to do that is the problem. But actually, you could just take the ends off, so if there's any rust or any corrosion on them, it's usually at the ends, and
Yeah.
the rest of it's perfectly normal, could be reused. And if you think amount of steel, the amount of energy went into producing all that steel,
Yeah.
so I think Russ and others are trying to sort of challenge the system and find new
Yeah.
ways of getting around those problems and
You've given us
extending the
two
life of
really
products.
good examples there within Coventry, Tom White and the WMG. Can I ask you then, over all of your career, what is your favourite or your best example of this in practice? If you've got like a funny anecdote maybe, or a
Yeah,
good
quite
example
fun one,
for
which
us to
leads
sort of
to a
link
nice
into
little,
our
yeah,
audience.
there's a good fun one that leads to the
Yeah.
end statement. Yeah, there's a company in the Midlands that deals with bakery products, egg products for the baking industry. So as you can imagine, they have to crack a lot of eggs, and so the eggshells, which was a waste. Was a waste material. Now that material is now used by a company that makes wall tiles and floor tiles, and it's treats it and then makes these tile materials out of it. So now you can actually say you literally are walking on eggshells.
Boom, boom. It's a good
But it's
example.
a lovely example. And
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
the one with coffee granules, coffee grains,
Yes.
which are being used to make coffee cups. It's like people are being really creative about how you use materials, and the material science is really critical here. And an area that's really important to us is when we look at Horizon 2020. All the European funding that went into doing a lot of that research, it's
Yes.
critical that that research continues, that government continues to fund it, because there lies a lot of innovation and a lot of potential opportunity for new products and services that this country can produce.
Excellent. So think outside the box, I think, is worth considering there. There's
Yeah,
lots of things we can look at as a whole.
yeah. As long as it's
Good
a
answer.
reusable box.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, good response. Finally, then, just moving on to my final question to sort of tie it all together now. Obviously, we're in consultation for the strategy. When that's done and we're looking to move forward, what do you foresee the city council's role overall in driving the circular economy agenda forward, moving forward into the
Yeah.
future?
So, for example, we're building a massive materials recycling facility, which is going to serve 7 local authorities, servicing them. So we're going to be gathering a lot of raw material that hopefully, in this case, is recycling. That's one element of circular economy. We'll hope, though, that before it gets to that we'll actually be helping companies develop new products that extend the life of products, find ways of repairing and servicing products. Hope to see that there'll be more skills in that area, in that sector, that people will be able to do that, and that we'll have a much more stronger focus on on quality, and that's goods and services that can be maintained over time, and that we'd be able to support groups in developing those new ideas, new technologies, and also in terms of just for us just generally raising awareness and trying to stimulate demand for some of those products as well. And when we're doing what we're doing, that we ourselves set an example. So for example, if we're doing road construction, are we using materials that have been being reused when we're doing our road construction? Are we doing when we're advocating in our local plan for development of new buildings? are we making sure that we try and encourage as much as possible that things are reused, or have extended lifespans, or there's ways in which things can be repaired, and that there's a focus on all of that when we're stipulating conditions and requirements for new developments. So all those sorts of things that we can have an influence on.
Good stuff. So obviously there's so much work going on, and there's lots obviously within our strategy. If anyone listening now would like to learn more about the strategy, the link is on our podcast description. You can jump onto our website and have a look at that. It is very, very, very interesting, and there's lots of info there. Bret, that's given our audience a really good insight into what's going on in Coventry and what we're looking to do. Thanks for speaking to me, and thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot. Welcome.
If you would like to learn more about Coventry's climate change strategy, about Gemserv, join our Green Business Network, or leave comments and feedback to us about the podcast or the circular economy, then please do get in touch via the links in the podcast description. Thank you for listening to the Coventry and Warwickshire Green Business Programme podcast. The Green Business Programme is part funded by the European Regional Development Fund and delivered by Coventry City Council, Coventry University and Coventry University Enterprises. This podcast was produced by Maria Kovlia and hosted by Jonathan Howell. Thanks for listening.